Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping right into the hyper-sanitized, relentlessly cheerful, and honestly, utterly terrifying dystopia of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. We're going to look way past the shiny surface of this utopian facade to uncover the clinical, calculated mechanisms of biological and psychological control that the world state uses to guarantee its ultimate goal. We'll see exactly how a whole society is literally engineered to love its own servitude.
All right, let's dive right into this. Community, identity, stability. Now, this isn't just some catchy corporate slogan. This is the planetary motto of the world state. And these three specific words dictate absolutely every single aspect of this society. Individualism, eradicated for community. Uniqueness, cloned out for identity. And all human passion and conflict are entirely suppressed just to maintain ultimate stability.
So to understand exactly how they pull this off, here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at standardizing the human product. Then, hypnopaedia and mind control. Third, soma, the perfect drug. Fourth, we'll go inside the savage reservation. And finally, we'll look at the right to be unhappy.
Okay, part one, standardizing the human product. Let's look at the very first pillar of world state control, the literal mass production of human biology. Because in this world, humans aren't born anymore, they're decanted.
The absolute cornerstone of this biological engineering is something called Bokanovsky's process. It's essentially a series of calculated arrests of development. Scientists intentionally check the normal growth of an egg, and in response to this trauma, the egg does something totally unnatural. It buds, proliferates, and divides. This is the biological cloning mechanism that standardizes the human product into identical batches of lowercase workers, which they call gammas, deltas, and epsilons.
And the scale of this is just staggering. 96. That is the maximum number of perfectly formed identical twins that can be produced from a single Bokanofied egg. As the director of hatcheries enthusiastically points out, you can have 96 identical twins working 96 identical machines. It's wild.
So the clinical process goes exactly like this. Step 1, check the normal growth. Step 2, force the egg to bud and proliferate. Step 3, harvest up to 96 identical embryos. For the very first time in human history, the principle of industrial mass production was finally applied directly to human biology. And this is how they solve the problem of social unrest. They just create standard men and women in perfectly uniform batches.
Moving on to part two, hypnopaedia and mind control. Because, biological standardization is really only half the battle. Once you've manufactured the perfect identical citizen, you still have to program them. And that brings us to psychological conditioning.
This is achieved through hypnopaedia, or sleep teaching. Now, the early experimenters in the world state actually failed at this initially. Why? Well, because they mistakenly tried to use it for intellectual education. They would whisper facts, like, say, the length of the Nile River, into a sleeping child's ear, only to find the kid could parrot the words back, but had absolutely no idea what they actually meant.
Now, what's really interesting here is the pivot. They realized hypnopaedia absolutely cannot teach intellectual facts, but it can perform deep, wordless, subconscious conditioning. It can inculcate complex courses of behavior and force moralization without any reason at all. By whispering phrases thousands of times into the ears of sleeping children, the state literally wires their brains to love their predestined social roles and blindly accept the state's values.
The director proudly calls this the greatest moralizing and socializing force of all time. It completely bypasses the intellect. Words are just dropped directly into the subconscious until the child's mind is made up entirely of these state-sponsored suggestions. It's literally like programming a computer.
All right, part three, soma, the perfect drug. So we've got cloned bodies and programmed minds. But what happens if a citizen still feels a little bit of anxiety or sadness? Well, that leads us to the third pillar of control, a mandatory chemical pacifier given to every single citizen.
Think about how we cope with suffering today. In the past, humans used various mechanisms, right? The world state compared their new invention, soma, to two of the oldest coping mechanisms, alcohol and Christianity. But soma has all the advantages of both, and literally none of the defects. It offers a perfect holiday from reality, an instant escape from any unpleasant emotion, without ever causing a hangover or a destructive morning after.
Soma is euphoric, it's narcotic, and it's pleasantly hallucinant. If a citizen has a bad day, or even a single dark thought, they just swallow a half-gram tablet and boom, they're instantly cured. It is brilliantly described as Christianity without tears. You don't need years of hard moral training or spiritual effort to achieve peace anymore. You just carry half your morality around in a little bottle. It completely eliminates the capacity for human endurance by just making it unnecessary.
Section 4. Inside the Savage Reservation. Let's completely shift gears here and look at the outside world, the places that haven't been conquered by cloning, sleep teaching, and soma.
Deep in places like New Mexico, there exists the Savage Reservation. There are an estimated 60,000 people living out there, and they are entirely isolated from the world state, living in places like the Pueblo of Malpais, quite literally fenced off by electrified wire.
There's an incredibly jagged divide here. It perfectly captures the sharp, irreconcilable contrast between the hyper-sanitized, perfectly smooth world of London and the painful, messy, disease-ridden, but utterly authentic human life taking place on the reservation. Out there, people are born naturally, they grow old, they practice religion, and yes, they suffer.
Which brings us to part 5, the right to be unhappy. It's from this savage reservation that a man named John is brought back to the world state. And this brings our explainer to its absolute climax, the incredibly high-stakes philosophical debate between the world state's leader-controller Mustafa Mond and John the Savage. And this brilliantly illustrates the core clash. It's Mustafa Mond's comfort versus John the Savage's freedom. Mond actually makes a deeply compelling argument. He says to have a truly functioning, peaceful civilization, you have to choose machinery, scientific medicine, and universal happiness. On the flip side, John, who has lived the raw human experience, demands the things that make life meaningful to him: God, poetry, real danger, and true freedom.
Now, Mond is actually incredibly self-aware. He freely admits the massive cost of perfect stability. High art, like Shakespeare's Othello, gone, because tragedy requires social instability. Religion and God were completely eliminated, replaced by soma and machinery. Passion and chastity were eradicated, because passion means neurasthenia and instability. And real danger and heroism were removed, simply because a perfectly stable society has absolutely no need for heroes.
And this leads right to Mond's ultimate, summarizing challenge to John. After John rejects all this sterile comfort, Mond looks at him and says, "In fact, you're claiming the right to be unhappy." Because Mond knows that to claim true human freedom means you must also claim the right to grow old, to catch typhoid, to live in constant apprehension, and to be tortured by unspeakable pains. To which John the Savage delivers his stark, defiant, and just unforgettable response. Facing a lifetime of guaranteed euphoria and painless stability, John simply says, "I claim them all." He accepts all human suffering, pain, and uncertainty just to preserve his authentic humanity. No compromises. Which leaves us with Huxley's ultimate dilemma. It was posed back in 1932, yet it feels more relevant today than ever. So I'll ask you, would you trade your freedom, your high art, your passions, and even your fundamental right to be unhappy in exchange for a foolproof guarantee of perfect, euphoric, and painless stability? It's a really heavy thought to sit with.